What's up guys, Hunter Konechny here. Today I wanted to go over everything that has to do with jigs. So baits, technique, trailers, equipment, just everything you would need to know to use a jig the most successful. So if you're a returning viewer, thank you for returning to my page. If you're new to my page, I make educational videos just like this where I really break down different techniques, give you guys all the little tips, tricks, everything you might need to know to catch more fish on the water. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. In addition to that, I also like doing fun challenges on the water, like my 15 and 5 challenge. I also do a lot of fishing tournaments. So if you like that kind of stuff, watch out for those videos as well. So let's get into it. So to start off, I'm going to start with really kind of the specific different jigs I use. So I like to kind of think of it as three different sizes. So you have kind of your real big jigs, like this one for example. And then I like throwing kind of a medium size, which would be more something along this. And then I go all the way down to kind of more of like a finesse type jig, like this Kitech right here. So really the three different sizes kind of covers every base you would typically need to utilize. So a lot of times that kind of middle ground one can be very effective in a lot of different situations, and then there's certain situations where I might branch off to the two extremes there, so the super big ones or like the smaller finesse one. I'll start off on kind of the biggest extreme here, and then we'll kind of go down to more of the smaller size there. So this specific jig is a Dirty Jigs jig. It's just a football jig. Nothing too special there. Got a good weed guard on it. I've caught a lot of fish on these. It's just been something that's worked well for me. I know there's a lot of football jigs out there, and honestly there's probably not too much different. So I know this one has a good hook in it. That's kind of why I steer towards these. But if you have one that you're used to using or familiar with, I'm sure that's going to work fine for you too. But this is the full size one here, 3/4 ounce. And then the trailer on that is a full-size D-bomb. So I mean, this is a pretty sizable jig. And when I'm going to throw the biggest ones is going to be at lakes when I know there's a lot of big fish and they tend to be pretty aggressive. So for our local lakes, if I'm out fishing like Apache, Saguaro, Roosevelt, places like that, I'm probably honestly going to start with this full-size one this time of year. I'm going to throw this probably until, I'd say maybe November, maybe even into December. And then once it starts to get cold, I'll downsize that a little bit. But the lakes that have a lot of big fish in them, I'm going to generally start with these bigger size jigs. And then you can always branch down if you're not getting a lot of bites on it. But really what I'm going for when I'm throwing a jig is getting bigger bites. So that's really where it shines, is you'll catch the bigger fish in the area rather than just the numbers. So if I'm throwing a bigger fish or going for bigger fish, I'm just going to throw a bigger bait. Now, this middle-sized one, once again, this is the Dirty Jigs football jig. This is the 1/2 ounce size. It's just a little bit smaller in general, so the skirt's pretty similar, but sometimes I'll trim that down just a little bit. And then I'm going to put a little bit smaller trailer on it, and that's going to make the overall profile quite a bit smaller. So on this 1/2 ounce one, I'm going to do something like a 5-inch double tail grub from Yamamoto is a really good trailer for that. So this one's actually the hula grub right here. I don't have any double tails on me right now. I realized I just ran out of those, but you can take these hula grubs if you want and just snip the little part off the front there. So you just bite it off or use scissors, whatever you need to do, and then you just weed it on there like that. So as you can see, this jig has caught quite a few fish and has been fished for a while. But that's generally what I'm going to throw on the middle-sized one, is either like a hula grub, or the smaller size D-bomb is another good one. More just kind of a chunk type trailer. Not a ton of action, but it's got a decent amount. So that smaller size D-bomb's about perfect for that kind of middle ground one. But those work really good. And then another one, if you want something that's just a little bit more aggressive, is this Yamacraw. So this thing just kicks back there a lot. It's got a lot of action going. If you like hopping your jig and different things like that, this can be something that works pretty good. And this does float as well. So with that floating plastic back there, it can be enough to kind of get your feet in the air there where it's standing up and it looks like it's kind of got its claws up in the air. So that can be another good one. And then the smaller sized one, so this is the Kitech jig right here. These ones have a Gamakatsu hook in it, so super solid hook. They're tungsten, so they can be a little bit more sensitive. You can feel a little bit more with it. So these are high quality jigs. You do pay for these, but I mean, it's kind of part of it. There is probably some cheaper options out there, but a lot of these finesse ones kind of have that tungsten head in there, so there isn't really getting around that too much. The situations where I'm going to throw this is in lakes where either A, the fish are smaller and they're not really keyed in on eating bigger things, like they might be at like Apache, Saguaro, places like that where it's just a lot of 5+ pound fish. If you're fishing a lake like Bartlett, this is perfect for that, where you're still getting that jig profile, and you might separate and get some of those bigger fish in the school by throwing a jig, but you're also kind of catering to the smaller fish size there, so that works really good there. Another place I'm going to throw that is if there's a lot of smallmouth. So a jig for smallmouth is honestly a great technique to throw for them. Works very well. They're very keyed in on eating crawdads a lot of times, so that's a very, very effective way to catch them. And just getting that smaller profile just tends to work better, in my opinion, for smallmouth in particular. So that's throwing this around smallmouth is a really killer way to get them. And then lastly, if you're fishing just super clear water, so local lakes, if you're fishing like Pleasant, I mean Havasu, anything on the Colorado River chain has smallmouth in it as well, so that's a good place to throw that as well, is just clear water with smallmouth. But when you're fishing that super clear water, sometimes having that just smaller profile, it's a little bit more natural. It kind of fits a little bit more of what the general crawdad size actually is, and that can really get more bites. And the turn side of that, if you're fishing just super dirty water, sometimes throwing this big one here just helps them key in a little bit more, and they can really feel that profile and see it a little bit easier, where otherwise if you throw in the smaller ones, it might not be enough presence for them to really key in on it, and you might not get as many bites. So just something else to consider. For trailers on this little one, a lot of times what I'm going to put on this is just going to be this either 4-inch double tail grub from Yamamoto. So I'll throw one on real quick. So I mean, that's a pretty dang perfect profile, honestly, a pretty good size. So that 4-inch grub on the smaller finessey jigs is just about perfect, and that's what I'm going to use probably 80-90% of the time. Another option, if you wanted to use like the little tiny D-bomb, like the micro D-bomb, that can be a really good one, where it's still got that craw profile, really natural presentation. It's just a lot smaller, so that can work really good. But I mean, with the finesse jig, you don't have to get too crazy. I mean, any of these jigs, if you put a double tail grub on there like that, I mean, that's about as good as any trailer you can really put on there. And I mean, I throw that a lot, so I mean, between that and something like the D-bomb, I mean, I probably throw those grubs, I'd say 70% of the time, and then I probably throw the D-bombs maybe the other 20% or so. And then, so the last option is just throwing just a straight hula grub on a jig head here. So I've caught many fish over the years on those. So if you don't need they do make these with weed guards as well, but generally I'm throwing this, I'm probably not throwing it with a weed guard. But just a straight football head jig head and just throwing that hula grub on there, you would be surprised how many fish that thing catches. I mean, that honestly, I've probably caught more fish over the years on this than I have throwing a standard jig. I feel like recently I've been throwing a lot more of just the standard jigs, but I mean, I have caught a lot of fish on these things over the years. It's just a straight fish catcher. You can also downsize it, so they make a 4-inch hula grub as well. Downsize it, and then you're kind of fitting more of that more finessey type presentation. And then they think they'd even make a smaller one now. They might even make a 2.5-inch one, so you can just throw that little tiny thing. Now you got a super finesse presentation. So if you're fishing just real tough conditions, clear water, smallmouth, anything like that, that can be a real killer. So I think that pretty much covers the jigs I generally use, and I feel like I covered the trailers as well. But to keep it simple, I mean, if you get a double tail grub, and if you get some kind of chunk trailer like a a missile D-bomb, smaller D-bomb, reaction innovations beaver, something like that, you're pretty much covered. So between those two things, that's really just about all I use. So let's get into how I fish these now, and I'll kind of go over that, and then we'll get into equipment a little bit later down the road here. So when I'm fishing a jig, generally how I'm going to do it, you're going to just hook that thing out, feed it some line, let it sink all the way to the bottom, and then it's just going to be a slow pull. So I'm just pulling, reel your slack up, pull, reel your slack up, and you're just feeling that thing kind of just bump over the rocks. And people call it counting rocks, but that's literally what you're doing, is you're just pulling and you're just feeling it drag over each little rock as it goes. So as it gets more aggressive in the summer, like this time of year, you can get a little bit more aggressive with it, where you might give it up some hops, do different things like that. And basically what that does is your bait's kind of going across the bottom here, and the fish might be sitting there looking at it, and then it hops up and it looks like it's kind of trying to swim away from them. So sometimes that can be a way to make them react and just kind of smoke that thing, where maybe just dragging it, if we might look at it for a while, and they might not always bite it. So another little tip there, so I'll pull it like 2 feet, about like that, reel my line up, pull it again, reel the line up, pull it again. And you're just going to do that all the way back to the boat, or if you feel like you got it out of whatever the strike zone you might be throwing at is. So they're pretty simple to fish, and then when you get to bite, you're either, with the jig, a lot of times what's going to happen is you're just going to feel them thump it. So it's just that thump, set the hook, reel them in, you should get them in the boat. I mean, it can happen as well, and I had this happen a lot when I was fishing Parker and some current the other day, where you throw it out and you just don't really feel, like, you can't feel the bait very good, and all of a sudden it just feels heavier. So if you feel like there's more weight than there should be just from the bait by itself, kind of lead into that a little bit, and if it's just got that wet sock feel, set the hook, because it's probably in the fish's mouth. So they do bite it on the fall sometimes, or just like if you hop it or do different things, sometimes they just get it and you just don't feel it, and that's kind of how it goes sometimes. So you just got to be aware. If it feels heavier than you think it should, just set the hook, because it's probably in a fish's mouth. So another thing I wanted to cover real quick is when I kind of choose the weights behind the jigs. So like I said, if I'm using the super big one, it's probably always going to be a 3/4 ounce. If you put too much trailer behind a 1/2 ounce, it's just not really heavy enough to drag it down there, and it takes a long time to get to the bottom. So I'm gonna use 3/4 ounce most of the time if I'm throwing the bigger ones. And then I'm also gonna use 3/4 ounce if I'm fishing deeper. So I can take this one and put a smaller trailer on it if I want to, if I'm fishing deep. But if I'm fishing over like 25 feet or so, just use the 3/4. It saves a lot of time. You can feel the bottom a lot easier. It just makes things a lot easier on you. Where the 1/2 inch or 1/2 ounce, I mean, starts to just get a little bit too slow. You don't really feel it very good. It just makes it a lot harder, unless you're throwing the finesse ones. If you're throwing a finesse jig in a 1/2 ounce, then no problem. You can still feel that thing fine. It's just not enough mass to really slow it down like the bigger ones. The 1/2 ounce, I'm gonna throw that if I'm fishing a little bit shallower water. So I mean 15 to 25 feet, the 1/2 ounce works great. If I really want the bait to be slow, like maybe we're fishing in the winter and I just really want it to be really like methodical and falling a lot slower and just more natural in general, then I will throw the 1/2 ounce in that situation. So even though I might be fishing deeper, sometimes you're not necessarily looking to be quick and have super precise feel. You're looking to be a little bit more natural, so throwing the lighter one can work really good in those situations. And then for the finesse jigs, I pretty much, if it's going to be like over like 15-20 feet, I'm just going to throw a 1/2 ounce. I don't really like throwing the 3/8 if it's shallower than, or deeper than that. If I'm throwing it less than that, then 3/8 works fine. So it just really depends on the depth there, but I keep it pretty simple for that. As far as equipment, for the bigger jig, this is the rod I typically use for that. So this is a Shimano Poison Adrena. It is the 7'4" heavy one. So having a little bit of extra length on the rod when you're fishing a jig is definitely really beneficial, because it makes your lever a little bit longer, and I feel like when you're setting the hook, it just allows you to kind of keep up with them and catch up to them quicker. I've thrown it on a 7-foot rod plenty of times before, and I just feel like a lot of times you feel that you're not really getting the line caught up as quick as you can. So having something in that like 7'3" to 7'6" or so range works really good for that. For the heavier size jig, so if you're throwing typically a 3/4 ounce and a 1/2 ounce, then you're going to want a heavy fast action. This rod right here is actually moderate fast action, and I really like it. So either fast or moderate fast works really good for jigs. This rod right here, I have started using recently, and I found I really like it for throwing jigs. It's super sensitive, it just works really good. I like throwing kind of the medium sized ones, or I can even throw the smaller ones on this as well, but this is an X-Pride heavy 7'2" fast action. This rod's really nice. It's kind of more of that middle ground price range, and it just works really good. I like it a lot. So this one's worked really good. But if you're throwing the kind of smaller, so if you typically throw a 3/8 to 1/2 ounce, then you can probably get away with the medium heavy for that. So if you're throwing a lot of 1/2 ounce, 3/4 ounce, I'd probably throw it on a heavy. If you're throwing a lot of 3/8 to 1/2 ounce, then medium heavy is probably good. And then if you're throwing real big ones like 1 ounce jigs or bigger, you're probably going to need an extra heavy for that. As far as line size, so with a jig, generally there's going to be a lot of factors that kind of play into exactly what line size I pick for that. But for standard practical purposes, if I'm throwing the big one or the medium one and the water isn't just ridiculously clear, I'm probably going to throw that on 16 most of the time. On the smaller size one, like I said, a lot of times when I'm throwing this is going to be because it's in clear water. Not always, but generally. So this one I'm going to throw anywhere from like 10 to 14, just depending on exactly the situation. But with a jig, I can throw that thing anywhere, like I said, from 10 to 16. The water clarity is going to play the biggest factor in that. So if it's super clear water, you're just going to kind of have to take the risk a little bit there and throw that on 10-pound line. If you're fishing dirtier water, you're grinding this thing through rocks all day long, so having that little bit heavier line there can definitely help out. So I recommend anywhere from 16 to 10. It's going to depend on the water clarity, how big the fish are, and what specific jig you're throwing. So this little tiny one, I probably don't want to throw that on 16 if I don't need to, but the other one, 16 is fine. So the last thing I wanted to cover is color. So you can see here, this is a green pumpkin. With jigs, I really throw 3 colors, so I'd say 70% of the time that's going to be green pumpkin. The other 20% of the time, so this one right here is super matte brown. So it's peanut butter and jelly kind of color, so you can see it's got a little bit of purple on the bottom, got a little bit of brown for the most part of it. So that's another good one. But green pumpkin's going to be pretty much 70% of the time I'm going to throw that, and then I typically just match the trailer color with it. So like green pumpkin, I'm going to throw green pumpkin on there, and then that last 10% is going to be watermelon. So if I'm fishing super clear water, this is actually a green pumpkin jig, but the trailer on it's watermelon. So those are pretty much the colors. I mean, you don't have to get too far off of that. I mean, if you're throwing some kind of brown or green, you're generally going to be right in the wheelhouse of what you need to do. But that's going to pretty much wrap it up. I mean, I feel like I covered everything that's critical as far as jigs go. So just get a good high quality one. Get one with a good hook, Gamakatsu, something along those lines, owner, just anything with a good hook like that, and you're probably going to be set. So the jig has saved my butt a lot of times recently, especially in these 15 and 5 challenges, as I'm sure you saw at Horseshoe. So I wouldn't be scared to throw it. It's something that does catch a lot of bigger fish, and it just works good. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and check out the next one.